Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another PVAO virtual commemoration as Manila celebrates its 77th Liberation Day. To begin, here's PVAO Administrator Undersecretary Ernesto G. Carolina for his message.
May I greet Manila City Mayor Francisco Isko Dumagoso. I'd like to greet also Manila 3rd District Representative John Marvin Nieto. I wish to greet Madam Heather Catherine Variava of the U.S. Embassy. Of course, our President of the Veterans Federation of the Philippines, Dr. Cesar Pobre, Dr. Ricardo Jose of the University of the Philippines, our dear veterans, and everyone who are with us today, a blessed day to one and all. Today, I am pleased to join you in this virtual commemoration of the 77th anniversary of the Battle for Manila, one of the fiercest and most brutal battles in the Second World War. It is also among the most significant victories achieved by the combined Filipino and Allied forces. The battle started on February 3, 1945, when the U.S. military, with the aid of Filipino guerillas, started to penetrate Manila to liberate the city against the Japanese occupying forces. The urban fighting was intense, with overwhelming fire from guns, tanks, and bombs from both sides. True enough, thousands of Americans, Filipinos, and Japanese soldiers were killed and severely wounded. Once again, we give credit to our very own Filipino fighters who fought alongside the Allied forces. Among the thousands of brave men are Captain Manuel Colaico, head of the Manila Allied Intelligence Bureau, and Lieutenant Diosdado Goitinco, who is also from the same outfit. Together, they helped the flying column reach the Santo Tomas internment camp. Captain Colaico provided a detailed map to the American troops, which contains specific locations of the Japanese installations in the streets of Manila, and this and many others were proven to be of extreme importance in the liberation of Manila and its people, who have suffered so much at the hands of the Japanese invaders. In the first days of Manila fighting, some 5,800 prisoners of wars and civilian internees were rescued. The first to be liberated is the University of Santo Tomas internment camp. It was a successful operation, but it was here that the first Filipino casualty of the Battle for Manila, Captain Manuel Colaico, was mortally wounded. It is painful to once again relive the stories of this month-long devastation. Manila City, then famously known all over the world as the Pearl of the Orient, suffered total destruction, and most of the cultural heritage destroyed cannot be rebuilt anymore. But more than the broken structures, the most heartbreaking consequence are the thousands of innocent lives lost during the battle. Over 100,000 civilians were caught in the intense crossfire between attackers and defenders, but most were intentionally harassed, massacred, and mutilated by the Japanese troops as a form of retaliation. Indeed, the battle of this the victory achieved in this battle, which ended on March 3, 1945, was paid with a very heavy price. The Battle for Manila is a testament to the adage that in war, nobody wins. It also reinforces what our few remaining living World War II veterans always say when you ask them what is the most important lesson they learned during the war. And invariably, they would tell you that there should never be another war. So today, as we continue to talk about the historical significance of this battle, let us listen with empathy and a sincere heart. Let us remember how our veterans fought with all their might to liberate the city of Manila and the country, and how their sacrifices benefited us. To this day, they fought for the future, and we are the future. As we commemorate this historical event, may we move forward with our daily lives with a deeper sense of gratitude for our life and freedom, and use this to serve others and help those who are in need. This is one of the ways we can pay back our debt of gratitude to our veterans, to perpetuate their legacy of serving fellow Filipinos and the country above oneself, and to preserve the freedom that they fought for us. Mabuhay ang mga veterano, mabuhay ang mga Pilipino. God bless us all.
Thank you very much, Yuse Carolina. Now let us watch this audio-visual presentation to know more about this month-long battle that brought devastation to the city that once was called Pearl of the Orient. Now here to give his message on the significance of the Battle of Manila is Dr. Ricardo Trota Jose, history professor from the University of the Philippines.
Good day, everyone. Every February, the city of Manila commemorates the destruction of much of the city in 1945. The Battle of Manila, which lasted for 1 month, February 3 to March 3, marked the only time in the Pacific War when Japanese forces fought to defend the city. As a result, the central portion of the city was reduced to ruin, and around 100,000 civilians died in the crossfire. The Japanese garrison, composed mainly of Japanese Naval Landing Force troops, was virtually annihilated. The Americans lost over 1,000 combat deaths, but 5 times that much were wounded. And this is important because the Americans had only a limited number of soldiers who were actively involved at that particular time. They were hard-pressed at that particular time. How many civilians were wounded can only be estimated. Among the dead were not only Filipinos, Americans, and Japanese, but also Germans, Spaniards, Filipino Chinese, and others. So it was really a tragedy of international proportions. Apart from the loss in human lives was the destruction of infrastructure, churches, schools, government offices, bridges, piers. Among these structures were heritage buildings which had withstood centuries of natural calamities. And within these buildings were irreplaceable cultural relics, documents, and collections. Indeed, this was a tragedy of major proportions, and the Philippines would never fully recover from it. Other cities, Cebu, Baguio, Zamboanga, among others, were also heavily damaged or destroyed, but that was because of aerial or naval bombardment, to quote, soften up, end quote. The target. Manila was the only city in the Pacific War that was really fought for. And in fact, it brought out many tactical lessons that the Americans would have to learn, because if this was how fiercely the Japanese fought for Manila, which was not a Japanese city itself, what would it be like once the Americans invaded Japan proper? What happened in Manila would actually have a very important role in the decision to drop the atomic bomb, because if this could happen in Manila, then it could happen elsewhere as well, particularly in mainland Japan. So why did the battle take place? In December 1941, General MacArthur realized the historic and political significance of Manila, such that he moved his headquarters, as well as the Philippine Commonwealth government, to Corregidor. He declared Manila an open city. He would not fight for it, and the Japanese, in fact, took it without any fight. But despite the open city proclamation, Japanese planes bombed Manila, causing significant damage, particularly in Intramuros. In December 1944, then President Jose P. Laurel also pleaded with General Yamashita to declare Manila an open city, as had been done 3 years earlier. General Yamashita declined, citing as reason that he had no authority to do so. Tokyo would have to do that. Whether Yamashita tried to ask Tokyo to do so is not known. Yamashita, however, decided against defending the capital city, since he, as an army man, did not see the strategic necessity to do so. His strategy was to withdraw his forces to the mountains and fight a delaying battle there, tying down as many American troops as he could, and thereby giving more time to Japan to prepare for its defense. The Japanese commander of the naval garrison, however, had other ideas and defied Yamashita's orders to leave the city. There was fierce rivalry between the Japanese army and the navy at that time, and the navy forces were unwilling to be placed under army command. Furthermore, Rear Admiral Iwabuchi, he had lost his battleship in the Solomons. He was never again given a naval command, and that was an indignity by itself. But he felt that as a naval commander at this particular time, his prime duties were to deny the Americans the use of Manila's strategic port facilities. He thus ordered his men to destroy as much as they could of buildings and facilities that the Americans could use in their advance to Japan. Piers, bridges, airfields, strategic buildings were blown up or mined, key roads were blocked and defended, and the central part of Manila would be defended to the death. Aware that much of the civilian population awaited the Americans and were directly or indirectly involved with the guerrillas, the naval garrison in Manila began arresting civilian men and women even before the Americans actually reached Manila. When the first American forces did enter Manila in the evening of February 3, 1945, the Japanese had already massacred quite a number of civilians or had arrested them and prepared to massacre them. So when the Americans did enter Manila that evening of February 3, 1945, the Japanese began to demolish buildings, particularly in the Binondo, Santa Cruz area, creating a fire of very large proportions, which they hoped would delay the Americans as they began to consolidate their positions south of the Pasig River. Now, to the Americans, Manila was important as the political and economic center of the Philippines, and especially for its strategic position as a major base to support operations against Japan. First to be freed in Manila would be the American and Allied civilian internees held in Santo Tomas internment camp, whom the Japanese might execute at will or hold as hostages. This phase of the battle was successful, although some of the internees were actually held hostage in one of the buildings for a while. But the rescue of these American and other Allied civilians in Santo Tomas was a major success, and it would deprive the Japanese of the ability to hold these as hostage or to kill them. At the same time that Santo Tomas internment camp was liberated, other American units proceeded to Malacañang Palace, which they managed to capture intact. There was a third initial objective at that time, which was the Legislative Building, now the National Museum. And it was intended that these American troops would cross the Pasig River, Quezon Bridge, and liberate the Legislative Building. This, however, was not successful because the Japanese had put up strong points in Far Eastern University, they had put up roadblocks, and the Americans were unable to move further. Furthermore, the fire that was set in Santa Cruz was able to stop them in their advance, and thus they were unable to advance further. The main bridges across the Pasig River were then blown, cutting off all communication with the south. Thus began the one-month battle that we now commemorate. Massacres would take place. Victims of friendly fire so close to liberation would not live to see the day that they would be free. Wanton cruelty took place. Despite the tragedy, death, and destruction, there were innumerable cases of heroism. Several American soldiers won the Medal of Honor in the battle, not only in defeating Japanese strongpoints, but also saving lives by jumping on live grenades. Guerrillas provided timely intelligence on Japanese positions and fought against the Japanese heroically. Filipino doctors and nurses worked tirelessly under extremely difficult conditions, much the same way that our health frontline workers are doing today. Other people opened their doors to strangers to provide safety and food. Even prostitutes offered themselves to Japanese soldiers in order to spare young women from being raped. These cases of heroism provide light that pierces the darkness of the atrocities. After the battle, Central Manila was in ruins. The problems of peace were enormous, but the rehabilitation of the city has many lessons to learn from. Water resources were placed for the displaced residents. Food distribution points were established. Emergency electrical supplies were set up. Medical aid stations were put up. Emergency repairs were hastened. Indeed, this is another aspect of the battle that has not fully been studied yet, and one that is of immense relevance today, given the severity of the disasters that have overtaken us. There are many facets to the Battle of Manila, as we have not just seen. All are worth studying, not only as historical experiences that we should not forget, but also for the lessons we should have learned. May we remember and learn. Thank you very much for listening, and good day.
Next to give his message is the representative of the 3rd District of Manila, Representative John Marvin C. Nieto.
Isang mapagpalang araw po sa ating lahat. Ay kinagagalak po ng inyong lingkod na ako po ay isa sa inyong napili para magsalita para sa Philippine Veterans Affairs Office. Hindi po natin may pagkakaila na ang Battle of Manila ay isa sa mga pinakamahalagang laban sa ating kasaysayan. Isa ito sa mga naging susi sa inaasam at pinapahalagahan na kalayaan. Bilang isang batang Manileño, damang-dama ko po ang kahalagahan ng pagkakaroon ng pagkakaisa tungo sa isang hangarin na mas maliwanag at mas magandang kinabukasan. Hindi lamang para sa akin, kung hindi para sa mga susunod na henerasyon ng mga Pilipino. Napakahalaga na binabalikan natin ang ating kasaysayan. Hindi po dapat natin kalilimutan na mahigit 100,000 sa ating mga ninuno ang nagbuwis ng kanilang buhay para sa ating kalayaan. Naging mga martir para sa ating bayan, sa ating pag-celebrate ng ika-77 anniversary ng Battle of Manila. Sana ay palagi nating maalala na bilang isang bansa, mas nakikita ang ating husay at tapang sa panahon ng mga sakuna. Ika nga nila, our best moments do not come when we are at our highest nor at our best. But these strong, remarkable moments come when we are challenged and in a crisis beyond our belief. Bilang isang bansa, ang selebrasyon ng 77th anniversary ng Battle of Manila ay isang patunay na ang mga Pilipino ay matatapang, makabayan at higit sa lahat, may pagmamahal sa tunay na atin. Sa ngalan ni Yorme Isko Moreno Domagoso, Vice Mayor Hani Lacuna at ang mga representante ng bawat distrito ng buong bansa, maraming salamat at magandang araw sa ating lahat. Mabuhay po mga Pilipino!
And here to give her special message is the Minister, Counselor, and Deputy Chief of Mission from the Embassy of the United States of America, Mrs. Heather Catherine Variava.
It is my honor to speak with you today alongside Undersecretary Ernesto Carolina of the Veterans Affairs Office, Dr. Ricardo Jose, historian and professor of history at the University of the Philippines, Dr. Cesar Pobre, president of the Veterans Federation, Mayor Isko Moreno, and Congressman John Marvin Nieto. It is a privilege to join families, veterans groups, and World War II organizations as we honor the legacy and sacrifices of the Battle of Manila. The profound stories of the men, women, and children who survived the Battle of Manila, despite the horror and devastation all around them, remind us of the power and resilience of the human spirit. The legacy of the experiences of those brave Filipinos and Americans is an unbreakable bond between our two countries that continues today. Immediately after the war, Filipinos and Americans joined together to begin rebuilding. The key to their effort was the preservation of knowledge and the promise that education would provide the youth of the Philippines a brighter future. On September 26, 1945, President Osmeña delivered a speech to open a U.S. Embassy library on Taft Avenue. The library was the Thomas Jefferson Information Center. It became a center of cultural exchange in Manila and a testament to our enduring friendship. Today, that legacy lives on in the American Center at our embassy on Rojas Boulevard. The center is joined by a family of 15 American corners hosted at universities across the Philippines that are committed to providing a welcoming place to gain knowledge, learn new skills, and exchange ideas. In 1948, recognizing the promise of educational exchange in the aftermath of World War II, U.S. Ambassador Emmett O'Neill and Philippine Vice President Elpidio Quirino signed an agreement to promote mutual understanding between our countries through educational exchange. The agreement established the Fulbright Program of the Philippines and the Philippine American Educational Foundation, which has the proud distinction of being the oldest continually running Fulbright Commission in the world. Since its launch, more than 9,000 of the best and brightest Filipinos and Americans have participated in U.S. government-funded exchange programs that benefit both our countries. Upon returning to the Philippines, alumni of our exchange programs start new businesses, protect the environment, fuel economic growth, expand good governance, and enhance peace and security. Together, through increased educational exchange and the stronger connections that result, we create new and expanded economic opportunities that propel our countries to a more prosperous future. Although the challenges are different than they were 77 years ago, our countries are still working side by side. Through USAID, the United States has committed more than 1 billion pesos to assist communities impacted by Typhoon Odette. Last year, U.S. donations also facilitated the delivery of more than 60 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines to the Philippines through COVAX. And in just the first month of 2022, we donated 2.8 million additional vaccines to the Philippines. This is on top of the more than 1.9 billion pesos the United States has provided to support the Philippines' COVID-19 response. Filipinos and Americans together endured the trauma and challenges of World War II. We rebuilt after the war, growing ever closer as we did so. The alliance our nations forged during World War II and its aftermath continues to unite and inspire future generations of Filipinos and Americans. Today, we pay tribute to the people who bonded together and fought side by side right here 77 years ago, becoming allies for freedom. We honor their sacrifice by remembering their stories, learning from their experiences, and taking our relationship forward. We honor their memory as we seize every opportunity to strengthen our partnership as friends, partners, and allies. Reflecting on our shared history and sacrifice at events like this deepens my faith in the continued promise of the U.S.-Philippine relationship. I am confident that we will accomplish even more together in the years and decades to come.
And that concludes our virtual commemoration of the 77th anniversary of the Liberation of Manila. I am Felicia Lois Lanya. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and stay safe, everyone.